Hi everyone, my name's Hubble. I'm going to be talking to you today about a group called Reforma, which formally is the National Association to Promote Library and Information Services to Latinos and the Spanish speaking. So obviously the group's focus is on promoting LIS services to the Latino community. I know many of you work in public libraries in the Chicagoland area with many Spanish speaking patrons. So I hope you find this informative and to a degree applicable to what you do every day in your job. Reforma's stated mission here is divided into five separate objectives. The first of which reads to unite Hispanic librarians and other librarians interested in working with the Spanish-speaking community. So obviously this kind of goes to the idea of getting people together with like goals. Secondly, to promote and conduct research important to educational materials and library programs aimed toward the Spanish-speaking community. This goes to the fact it's probably imperative on Reforma and the rest of the LIS community to try to increase the amount of scholarly LIS research and work that's geared toward the Latino community. Third, promote the development of Spanish language in Hispanic-oriented library collections. I think this is a pretty big one. I can kind of speak to this directly. I know some collection developers at the library the two libraries that I work at, and obviously limited funding puts restraints on the kind of materials that they can buy regardless of the language. So a lot of times, while minority language materials may not be of lowest priority, they certainly can't be of the highest priority right now. The fourth objective here is to collect and disseminate information about and for the benefit of the Spanish-speaking community, which is a pretty straightforward goal for a group like this. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, in my opinion, is to help recruit and aid prospective bilingual and bicultural librarians. As Ruben and some of our other readings have pointed out so far in the course, the level of diversity among LIS professionals doesn't mirror that of the real world. And of course, getting more librarians who speak Spanish and have a background in the Latino community, can only help to serve that community in the future. I wanted to talk a little bit about the history and the structure of the organization. Reforma was founded in 1971 in California. It's divided into 16 different committees. So obviously these committees serve to, in a way, departmentalize the organization and divide up responsibilities. There's a few examples here: young adult services, translation services, things like that. Like many of the other organizations that we'll probably hear about, Reforma, of course, has an annual conference where presentations are put forth, and then future policy discussions are had as well. Reforma is divided into 19 regional chapters. So there's 4 chapters each in California and Texas for obvious reasons, given that they're high in population and, of course, proportionately higher in the Latino population as well. Our state, Illinois, is included in the Midwest chapter, along with Indiana and Wisconsin here in the region. It's important to note here that in 2010, Reforma partnered with AMBAC, which is more or less the Mexican equivalent of the ALA here in the United States. They put forth some common goals here when they entered into this agreement of cooperation. The first of which is the exchange of professional information, which is more or less kind of sharing scholarly work between the organizations. Secondly is to seek out opportunities for joint conferences, largely to promote common research between the two organizations and the two countries for that matter. Thirdly, which I thought was interesting, was to implement sister library programs in the United States and Mexico, wherein an American and Mexican library would perhaps share programming or have dialogue between patrons and staff, which I thought was a pretty interesting idea. Moving on to some of the awards and the aid that Reforma awards, like many of the other library associations, they award academic scholarships, financial awards, and the remainder of the awards that they give out, there is no financial component. It's simply recognition of achievement or excellence in the particular area. So you have individual librarian awards. There's an award for an author and an illustrator called the Pura Belpré Award, um, who was the first Latino librarian of the NYPL. And then fourthly, there's a departmental level award called the Mora Award. And this goes to most often a youth services department for exemplary celebration of a holiday called Dia de los Niños, Dia de los Libros. And if you're wondering what that is, I was too. It is an event that was more or less created by a member of Reforma. First of all, April 30th in Mexico is known as Dia de los Niños, or Children's Day in English, which is a fairly significant holiday in Mexico, more so than it is in the United States, with many community events and whatnot geared towards children. So, like I said, in 1996, the head of the Tucson branch of Reforma, Pat Mora, she kind of spearheaded this idea for combining the Children's Day with a literacy library involvement day. So she coined the term here, Dia de los Niños, Dia de los Libros. Um, Now it's more or less just called DIA generally, which has really become a nationwide event here, promoting childhood literacy and then also awareness of multicultural and multilingual backgrounds. And this kind of based on some of the reading that I did on the website and looking around at programs libraries were doing for the event, is kind of one of Reforma's more seminal accomplishments. This has become a pretty big deal in public libraries, to the extent that even other organizations have become involved, like ASLC, which is the Children's Services Professional Librarian Organization. They've even taken up the opportunity with the holiday to create mini grants where they'll give out a certain number of grants per year, to help fund what they call building STEAM with DIA programs, STEAM being the science, technology, engineering, and mathematical activities. So it's a pretty big event for Reforma. Another example of outreach that Reforma does here, which I thought was pretty incredible, is this program they developed called Children in Crisis. So as some of you may have heard in the news in the last year or so, there's been an issue with migrant children coming across the border in the United States and being detained without their parents. Um, what Reforma has done here is attempted to foster some degree of literacy and continuing education for these kids when they're kind of in this political limbo. So what they've been doing is collecting not only books, but notebooks, drawing supplies, writing utensils, backpacks, through donations, and then distributing these to these detention centers, in the Southwest United States, which I thought was a pretty admirable project. And in so doing, they've by no surprise been supported by the ALA, the ALSC again, and then the group called YALSA, which is the Young Adults Library Professional Organization. To get to more what Reforma does in the library, on their website and then through the various regional groups as well, they provide all sorts of resources for the Spanish and Latino communities, and then also for libraries to reach out to to those communities. So on their website, they have all kinds of resources for libraries to expand their Spanish language collection. They also have many kind of guidelines and examples for, and even translations for that matter, for how libraries can get the word out about their services that would behoove the Latino community. They also provide some instruction materials and kind of workshop guidelines for teaching Spanish to library staff, which clearly is pretty important to this day and age, that library staff be able to communicate with these parts of their community. And then also from the children's services side, have a lot of resources for creating Latino children's programming, and then also similar to the adult collection, um, adding storytime materials and materials for the children's collection for the Latino community, and also in Spanish. Finally, to kind of talk about what we may experience as librarians in public libraries. Well, first of all, I chose this group. I have a background in Spanish and linguistics, and also at one of the libraries that I work, I happen to be the only Spanish-speaking employee, um, and the demographics of the community that the library is in. There's a significant Latino population there, so I kind of find myself being the first line of defense when we get a Spanish speaker. Um, so anyway, on this slide here, on the left, I pulled this information from one of the presentations from a Reforma conference, and this was kind of an informal study done by a librarian in Kentucky, where they more or less tracked the data of what they were seeing from their Spanish-speaking patrons um, at the various service desks. So the stuff on the left, if you guys work in a public library, you're probably pretty familiar with this. So things like citizenship exams, computer use, obviously ESL, um, and then GED and other educational resources. Um, I'm just kind of wondering, should you happen to comment on the presentation, if that rings true for you. And also the second bullet point that this librarian found in her informal research here, was that patrons will often bring an English-speaking relative with them, as an interpreter. And then secondly, that once they find that Spanish speaker, they'll always seek them out when they visit the library. For me, those two things ring true, and I'm wondering if they match your experiences as well. Um, Finally, according to Pew, the Spanish-speaking population in the United States is set to double to more than 100 million by 2050. So clearly, it's pretty important that libraries will have to adjust in some way, including staff diversity and the materials that we have to match that need in the community. I hope this was informative for you guys, and I look forward to viewing your presentations as well.